Okay, hello everyone, welcome to this video. And today we're going to focus on IELTS reading. So before we begin, I just wanted to introduce myself. I am an IELTS instructor here at Free IELTS 911. So I am basically going to teach you how to improve your score for reading. My personal band score for reading is 8.5, and that's, I think, makes me qualified to teach you reading. So let's get started already. Now, in this lesson, we're going to talk about these things, like how IELTS academic reading works, and I'll also give you some general techniques and tips that you will need in the exam. But our main focus will be on true, false, not given, this particular type of question. And in the end, I'm going to show you a practice test where you get to see how I handle these question types. Now, like about IELTS reading, like what is it and how it's, like uh, organized. I think everybody is pretty familiar with it, but let me just walk you through that again. Well, IELTS reading, it basically is like 1 hour. It lasts for an hour, 60 minutes. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is that you're not given any extra time, unlike listening, to transfer your answers onto your answer sheet. So you might want to act quick. And my recommendation is that if you like once you finish one passage and then start transferring your answers, right? Like passage by passage, that's your best bet. Because if you like transfer your answers right onto the answer sheet, then you might change your mind sometimes, and that will probably um, hog some of your time when you have to, change your answers on your answer sheet, and it's probably going to leave some marks, which will not be as neat. Which is why I prefer to like transfer my answers onto my answer sheet right after I'm done with one passage. Although I never took the paper-based, right, the regular paper-based exam. Anyways, now there are 40 questions, and also like these 40 questions are laid across three passages. So we're also going to talk about passages, by the way. There are three passages, and passage one is a descriptive one, and that means like you'll have some information about an event or about a person or anything else, and it will be descriptive. There's not going to be arguments, right? Like the writer won't really incorporate his arguments or ideas into the text. So it's going to be pretty simple, and it's going to be factual as well. Like there's going to be a lot of data, right? Years and everything. So, a lot of description. And if anyone wants, like for further reference, you might want to check out nationalgeographic.com and like Scientific American, bigthink.com. So these websites are great that contain a lot of different articles on different topics that are descriptive, right? Not necessarily opinion papers. Now, passage two is an argumentative one, or sometimes it might be like a, in between, right? Sometimes it's argumentative or descriptive, or at large it can be a mix up, right? Like a mix up of both. Sometimes there might be arguments and description, right? But it's the language that passage 2 uses, right, is fairly less complicated compared with passage 3. So that's the difference, right? When it's argumentative, like what is argumentative? Well, when the writer gives his own arguments, right, like hidden arguments usually, right? Because when you do a reading passage, there are some questions, multiple choice questions that ask you uh, like what the writer thinks, right, or something like that, or like what that part implies. And it's quite essential to understand the hidden message behind some of the parts of the passage, right? So in that case, it's going to be really useful. And why am I actually mentioning the types of passages in the first place? Well, it can be useful uh, to help you like whether you should start with the passage or the questions. It's a good rule of thumb, right? As a good rule of thumb, you should start right with the passage when the passage is argumentative, because you might want to focus more on the text and the meaning that it has to offer, or the message that it has to deliver, to be able to answer all the questions correct. And more often than not, passage 2 and passage 3 are those kinds of passages where you might want to begin with the passage and then work your way up through the questions. But with descriptive ones, you don't have to read the whole text, right? Which is why it's good practice to start with the questions. I hope you got the idea. Now, uh, what does reading test actually, right? Well, there are basically two things that it does check if you're taking the IELTS exam, and that is your reading comprehension. That's the first and foremost thing. And that includes your grammar, your vocabulary, your logic, right? Everything, like how you're able to connect the dots, right? So if you're able to understand everything when you read it at first, right? When you read it like from the get-go, then I think that makes you a really good reader. If you're able to understand 90% of what you read, uh, there is, a good chance of you scoring a 9 if you know the right strategies and techniques. So, yes, how do you improve your reading comprehension? Everybody asks that. Well, by reading articles. We with ULUGBEK have this immersion SK, right? So there, we're sharing articles and then videos that I think will be really, really helpful, because like reading articles is the best way to improve your reading, simply because they are relevant to the exam, right? Like they're relevant uh, in the sense that they they are kind of similar to what you're likely to get in the real exam, like uh, because IELTS itself adapts these passages from papers that like top papers, right? Like top publications like The Guardian, Scientific American, New Scientist. So we're sharing those with you, and the original ones, by the way. Sorry, I seem to have, you know. Um, anyways, now another thing that it tests is your skills, right? So yes, that's also one of, not as much as you know big a problem as reading comprehension is, but it's still, I think, something that many people struggle with. So when you cannot when you cannot understand the text, that's one thing. It's quite another to not be able to, like, wrap your head around like how to go about the questions, right? So which is why I'm here, right? To help you and work things out, and with true false not given questions. Now, there are general techniques that I want to mention before we dive into the details and everything, and these are particularly helpful, to apply to, under exam conditions, like when you're on the real exam and sort of stuff, right? So my recommendation is that don't read the passage first, go to the questions right away, no matter what the type of passage it is, right? Whether it's argumentative or descriptive, you might want to first like zip through the questions so that you familiarize yourself, what you have, against you, or something like that. I forgot the idiom, but anyways, so yes, um, when you go to the questions first and then try to survey the questions, you will have a better idea of what you're about to deal with. So that's good practice. um, and by the way, you might not want to read the title as well, right? Like even after you finish zipping through the questions, you don't want to just, go straight to the passage. But even before reading the passage, by the way, you read the title, right? So many people leave this part out, like, because when you read the title, you kind of have this, create this connection between what you already have in your head about the passage and what you're about to read. So that's also kind of useful, because when you're engaged in what you're reading, I guess it's more likely that you'll get a higher band score than if you were to read it without any, engagement. Now, once you're done with that, And how do you zip through the questions, by the way? How do you go to the questions and how do you read the questions? Do you just read and ponder the questions? No, it's not like that. You just need to underline the keywords, right? So this way you know where to find the questions, right? Where to find the relevant part of the passage. So you look at the keywords, and we're also going to talk about keywords, by the way. And so you're going to look for similar words in the passage based on those keywords that you've highlighted from the questions. This will help you locate the relevant part. And once you've found that part, you're going to read it really carefully to understand the meaning, right? And everything. And decide uh, whether it's true, false, or not given. All right, now question types. There are basically these question types we have, right? Like, I don't know. How many of them? Like seven, right? Yeah, I guess seven. But today we're gonna focus on true, false, not given questions. So how, well, like, what are they, and how difficult they are? Like, what makes them so much difficult that uh, so even some instructors find them difficult? Well, and I am also in that list, by the way. I also find it difficult sometimes. Like they, uh, you know, yes. Okay, first things first, like what kind of question types are they? Well, they are they are the kind of questions that ask you to find factual information, right? So what does it mean? Well, that is, there is no any hidden meaning, right? Everything's there, everything's given in the passage. You know what you're looking for. So it's specific question type. It's not a general question type, like, for example, global multiple choice questions, right? Where you don't know where to look or some matching headings, right? So you don't know where the correct answers might be. But with, you know, true false not given, you know what to look for. You know that you're looking for this information, whether, just to prove if it's in the passage or not, or if it's, slightly changed in the question in the passage. And the questions, the answers for question, like for this question type, are usually in order. And that, what this basically means is that if you have question number one as true false not given, and question number two, right? Like you have five true false not given questions, let's just imagine. And all the answers come in order, in the sense that like question number two doesn't come before question number one. So that's the deal, right? Basically, like 99.9% of the time, every time I did a practice test, oh, well, sometimes with Cambridge test, that was sometimes this wasn't the case, right? But that's not to say that they're not in order. Now, we're gonna move on. So here's a sample question, right? Like your true false not given questions looks like this. So I think that's I think you're pretty familiar with that, by the way. Now, let's first establish what true is, right? Like, and we're gonna work our ways up through different questions, like through other options as well, like false, not given. Well, the answer true, according to what the instructions have to say, if the statement agrees with the information given in the text, right? If, for example, if the text says this, yeah, if the statement, which is the question statement, like we're gonna refer to questions as statement as of now, so get used to that. Get used to that. Now, when the question is the same, right? When the information, not necessarily the whole question, but when the information given in the question is the same as that in the text, then it's true. Let me just give you an example, a really simple example, and with the help of which we're gonna, you know, get a better understanding of more complicated questions. Now, the statement says Mike is older than 15, right? So imagine, like, Mike is 15, like, and over years old, right? Like maybe he's older than 15. The question says that explicitly. He is 15 plus, right? Like he is older than 15. And the text says Mike is 18 years old. Now, Is this true? Yes, it's true. Why? Because the question says explicitly that he has to be older than 15. If the passage says 15, then that would be incorrect. That would be false because the question says over than 15. And now, is he older than 15? Yes, he is because he is 18 years old. So as you can see, you can um, prove that the question is correct. So this is what true is like. Now it's turn for false. The descriptions say if the statement contradicts the information given in the text. So what does it mean? Well, if I say something is true and if the text says it's not true, then this is false. Like this. Mike is older than 10 and younger than 15, right? Like he's somewhere between 10 and 15, right? He's not 10, by the way, he's not 15, but he's between those ages. Well, if the text says Mike is 18 years old, well, that's obviously 18, like false, right? Um, but if the text were to say Mike is 14 years old or 13 years old, then that would definitely be true. Now, let's move on. Now, not given. If the statement cannot be found in the text or is partially given, well, everybody says that like cannot be found, right? But I'm telling you, not given is not given, right? In the text, like it is given, but we usually don't, uh, you know, we think that IELTS wants to trick us or anything, and like fall for some other suggestions and everything. So I think it's safe to say that IELTS is a standardized test, and it is in no way um, a biased or uh, some kind of a you know what do you say like I don't know like yeah that the word is it's not a scam. Now, let's just take a look at this. Now, here's how, like, this is when things get tricky, right? Like, people are a little confused with not given, true, false, right? So let me just make things more clear for you. So the question says, the statement says, Mike is older than John, right? X, right? And Y. So two different things. And X is, like, let's just say, um, the value of x is higher than that of y. But the text says, right, x is 18, right? X is 18. How does this mean? Like, what is this correlation? So that is when it's not given, right? We don't know, right? So it's, as a good rule of thumb, think of not given as given partially in the text, um, or what is it like? We don't know, right? So is it true that Mike is older than John? Well, we don't know because the text doesn't say anything about that. Well, yes, there is something about Mike's age, and there's something about Mike, but there is no comparison. We don't know if Mike is older than John. You see, so here is the trick, right? Some people think that the text doesn't really mention anything about uh, the comparison, right? Or maybe they think that okay, so the text mentioned Mike, right? The text mentioned 18 years old. So I guess, right? And earlier in the text, they may have referred to John as well. So some people think that, okay, so this must be true or this must be false, right? Because something like that. Well, this is a really, really, simple example, an easy example. So that's why I think that uh, it's not a good idea to think of not given as not given, right? Think of it as we don't know. Do we know that Mike is older than John? No, we don't. Why? Well, because the text, and by the way, if, like, again, like I said, I think I'm just trying to repeat myself. Mike is 18 years old. The keywords are given, right? The keywords are already given. And we're not really going to get caught up in this part because we have a whole other part on emphasis and everything. So you need basically a couple things to you know to be able to understand and answer like true false not given questions. And the main thing that you need is emphasis, understanding the emphasis of the question. So emphasis is what message the statement is trying to convey, right? So look at this. And how do you identify the emphasis? You see, my strategy is always asking yourself a question, right? So, for example, turning the statement into a question. Instead of Mike is older than John, let's just uh, convert it into a question. And then that makes us identify the message, identify the emphasis more easily. For example, is Mike older than John, right? Is it true that Mike is older than John? And you have three options, right? So the first one is yes, right? Mike is older than John, and you have to, base this answer on the passage, right? And there should be some evidence to it, right? Otherwise, it won't be correct, right? Is Mike older than John? Yes. Why? Because the text says so, right? Because the text says, Mike is younger, like John is younger than Mike, which is the same thing as Mike is older than John. Because IELTS passages don't really give you the answer like as it is, right? Like they're going to twist and paraphrase and everything. If it's true. Is it true that Mike is older than John? No. Why? Well, because the text says Mike is younger than John, or the John is older than Mike, right? So again, like really good, game of paraphrasing and everything, but you get the idea, right? So you can say false when you can, negate the statement and are able to justify your answer, right? Why no? However, you cannot justify your answer in not given, right? For example, Mike is older than John. Is it true that Mike is older than John? Well, no, right? We can say no, right? Is it true that Mike is older than John? No. Why? I don't know, right? Maybe he's older, maybe he's not. I basically don't know because there's not enough information in the passage to conclude that Mike is older than John. Yes, there is something about Mike's age and there's something about John's, I don't know, like John, but there's no comparison and we don't know if Mike is older than John or not, or the vice versa. Now, the emphasis here for not given is, is Mike older than John? Here, the emphasis is Mike being older than John, right? There's a comparison, there's a clear comparison, right? Like X is greater than Y. However, the emphasis, the structure, right? The emphasis in the text is totally different. It's like X is um, amounts to some kind of there's no y, right? There's no the other value, if you will, right? If you're good at math, the other um yeah the other value, there's like not value, I guess. There was some other word that I think could fit right here, right? uh if the uh yeah, but you get the point, right? So if the other you know y, right, there are two um letters, right? There are two letters like x and y, right? So if these two right here, right, like Mike is older than John, right? If these two don't um don't appear in the same manner in the passage, right? So then that's not going to make sense, right? So is Mike older than John? The emphasis here is on something being older than something, right? So, however, the text is like there's only one, there's no comparison. So emphasis is different, right? The emphasis are different. Now, how about false? Mike is older than 10 and younger than 15. Here, like, is it true that Mike is older than 10 and younger than 15? Like, what is the emphasis? Well, the emphasis, Mike being between these, what, like, age frame, right, so to speak. And if you answer the question, well, yes, right? Yes, he's younger than 10 and old, like he's older than 10 and younger than 15. Why, right? You ask yourself, well, because the passage says so. The passage says he's 11. Well, how? Why not? Like the passage says 18. Well, then it's false. You see, Mike is X years old, right? So both the statement and the text have the same emphases, right? So the emphasis is the same, right? Um, because like the meaning, the message is the same, like how old they are, right? Mike is X years old. Mike is X years old. So uh, the emphasis is the same, but the information is different, right? What is the information? Mike is 10 or like older than 10 or 15. So that's the information, right? X, right? So X years old. However, the text is also X years old, but I guess yes, but um, yes, it's not X like Y years old, right? So, but the problem is that the it's not X Y, so I should have corrected it, right? Right? As you can see, right? They both are the same, right? In terms of the structure, in terms of the emphasis, like, but the information is different. This is Y, this is X, right? Like these are two different information. How about true? Well, the emphasis, right? So the emphasis is like here, like, is Mike older than 10, 15? Yes, he is, right? 18. So here is like Mike is, I don't know, like, right? Mike is something and Mike is something. So the emphasis is the same. Now, we're going to move on and think about how we can approach questions. Well, the first thing that you need to do is identify the keywords in the question. And once you're done with that, you're going to find out where it's located in the passage. And then you're going to understand the meaning of that part and understand the emphasis of the question and then try to match them. And if they, go together, and then you're going to, decide. So, like, what are keywords and how do they help you? Well, keywords uh, are the kind of words in the question that help you identify the location of the answer, like that help you locate the answer. So, for example, in this one, in the example of suggestipedia teaching, in the fourth paragraph, the only variable that changes is the music, right? So the only variable that changes is the music, right? So suggestipedia teaching here is a strong keyword, the kind of keyword that won't change because it's something like a teaching, right? Sort of teaching. Um, and also, fourth paragraph signals to, like, we're gonna look at the fourth paragraph. The only variable that changes is the music, right? Music will probably not change as well because there is no any paraphrasing, like, synonym. Example, right? It's like not a really strong keyword. And then you're gonna go to the text and like really skim. So that's when reading skills are tested, right? You're going to skim, not skim, probably scan. You're going to scan for particular words, right? And keywords and synonyms. So the suggestipedia approach to foreign language learning provides a good illustration, right? So this is the opening sentence. Suggestipedia approach teaching, right? And good illustration is example. So that's the first part of the, question. The only variable that changes is the music. In its most recent variant, it consists of now you're not really going to read, by the way, right? At first, you're not going to read at all, almost, right? But you're going to find some keywords. Now that you find it, right, and then you're going to read, understand this part, right, and then once you understand this part, it consists of the reading of vocabulary and text while class is listening to music, right? Uh, Okay, the first session is in two parts. In the first part, the music is classical, and the teacher reads the text slowly and solemnly with attention to the dynamics of the music. The students follow the text in their books. By several minutes of silence in the second part, they listen to Baroque music while the teacher reads the text in a normal speaking voice. During this time, they have their books closed during the whole. Okay, so uh, is there anything about uh, changes, right? So now we're going to ask ourselves the question, right? The emphasis. Is it true that the only variable that changes, right, is the music, right? Is it true that the only variable that changes is the music, right? So we're gonna try to understand. Turns to text slowly and solemnly. Okay, with attention to the dynamics of the music, right? So the students follow the text in their books. This is followed by several minutes of silence. In the second part, they listen to Baroque music, while the teacher reads the text in a normal speaking voice. During this time, they have their books closed. Okay, so is it the only variable that that changes? Do we know that it's the only variable? Well, um, no, we don't know, right? Because we don't know if it's the only variable that changes, right? There are other variables like, you know, teacher reads the text slowly and solemnly, but there is nothing about, changes, right? So, yes. Now, uh, we're going to look at some of our, what is it? Oh, no, that's, oh, by the way, about true false not given. Um, with true false not given, both the emphasis match and the information. So that's what's left out. Now, the summary, like what do we take from this? There are two types of answers, right? Correct, like when you can prove your answer that the question and the text match. However, there's another scenario when you cannot say that the question is correct, right? The statement is correct because it's either false or not given. Now, the difference between false and not given is that with false, the emphasis, right? The emphases match, but the information don't, right? So it's like, Mike is 18, right? But text says Mike is 15, right? However, in not given, right? Emphases don't match at all. Now, um, I have some, prediction method that really helps you, right? When you like, when before even going to the text, you can do this, right? After you highlight the keyword and found the relevant part, right? So you can say, Mike is 18 years old. In your head, like this is a really good exercise before, doing any full practice test. Mike is 18 years old. Well, you think of it. Okay, the text has to say Mike is 18 years old, right? For the information to be correct, to be true, right? The text has to say Mike is older than 18 or younger than 18 for the passage for the statement to be false. And if there is not enough information on his age, or if there's no information at all, well, that's not, yeah, sometimes this happens. Then it's not given. So that's a really good practice, and you can even do that, like in a written way. So let's do some more simple practice, and I'm going to probably share a video on how I walk you through some reading, questions. Mike has an apple and an orange in his hand, right? Mike has an apple in his hand. So what do you think the answer is? Just pause the video and think about it. Mike has an apple and an orange in his hand. Mike has an apple. Well, your time is up. Now, the answer is not given. It's because, pay attention. Mike has an apple, X and Y, right? Two different things in his hand. However, the text says Mike has an apple, right? The if you ask, right, is it true that Mike has an apple and an orange in his hand? Well, maybe he has an orange and an apple, but we don't know if there's an orange as well, right? So that's why it's not enough to say that it's true or false. Well, we cannot say false because maybe he does have an orange. We basically don't know. So again, ask yourself this question, right? When you turn the statement into a question, that makes things a lot easier. Okay, so I don't think that's the right practice. We're gonna skip this. Okay, so that's basically it. So now, common problems. Some people think that if the words in the question match with those in the passage, the answer has to be true, right? Like this. Some doctors say that smoking is harmful, right? But the text says all doctors say that smoking is harmful, or not even all, but doctors say that smoking is harmful. Well, this is not true, right? Because maybe most doctors, right? maybe most doctors don't think that, right? Because it's false, right? Ask yourself, is it true that some doctors say that smoking is harmful? No, right? All doctors do, right? All doctors say that smoking is harmful, right? Again, it's a matter of emphasis, right? So where the emphasis falls. Another problem is like this. Mike works more than 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day. We think that, okay, so more than 6 hours a day. um, like the passage has to explicitly say that he's he works more than 6 hours. If the passage says 8 hours a day, right? So we might think, oh, maybe this is not given, right? Or maybe this is false because it's not right like this, right? But as you can see, it's true, right? We think that like the words don't match right here, right? No, IELTS doesn't make it like this easy for you, right? So you have to think, right, a little. Now, however, if the order changed like this, like if the statement said Mike works 8 hours, but the text says Mike works more than 6 hours, then that would be a problem because you would have to, you know, the answer in the text would not be definite, right? The text would say Mike works 6 hours. We don't know how much he works, right? But if the statement said Mike works 8 hours a day, maybe he works like 9 hours, maybe he works 7 hours. We don't know. Then that would be not given. So yes, thanks everyone for watching this video, and wait for the practice video. Bye.